The Doctrine of Rectification of Names, Utility and Sense. We live in a world of names that are appended to our persons from the time we were born until the time we die, and beyond. As long as we remain in the memory of people who can still remember us or embedded in the constantly evolving auditory and visual mechanisms like pictures, books, videos, voice recordings, anything that the imagination of people can conjure up to perpetuate the image of our being there, we have had names attached to us. I do not refer to proper names like the ones given us by whoever named us when we first saw our first images of the world, but to those which people around us use to refer to us as we explore the dimensions of space and time. Names that are attached to us as we gain more exposure and experience about the environment we live in. Names that are at certain point seem random enough. Names that add up as we mature and gain some sort of significance as we move along in life. What are some examples? Well, we were babies, toddlers, girls, boys, infants, children, brothers, sisters, for one. As we grew up, we were preparatory students, teenagers, elementary students, athletes, high school students, friends, college students, scholars, activists, and the like. We were Catholics, Muslims, Protestants, soldiers, doctors, teachers, engineers, vendors, street cleaners, traffic enforcers, for another. We were fathers, mothers, bosses, supervisors, employees, kagawads, mayors, barangay captains, governors, lolos and lolas. We were kaputol, palangga, kumpares, kumadres, ninong, ninang, husbands, wives, lovers, jowa, sweetheart. We can be comedians, actors, actresses, directors, chancellors, university presidents, script writers, camera persons. So many names can be attached to a single person. One can be a student, an activist, a scholar, a Christian, a lover, and a friend, all at the same time. So many names at the same time. And each of us have names attached to our persons. Can you think of names attached to you right now? Have you ever wondered why there are so many names attached to every person? What they are for? What the significance of their being connected to persons are? What use do these names have to our lives, our community, and the reason for our existence in the first place? As you watch this lecture, we will take a journey to a time thousands of years ago and root out one of the first, if not the first, permutations of this set of ideas, which I will call the Doctrine of Rectification of Names. The philosopher Confucius was the originator of the doctrine, or shall we say, one of the originators of the doctrine. More popularly known as Confucius, he is a philosopher and teacher who lived in ancient China from 551 to 479 BCE, or before Common Era, which is about 2,574 years ago. We call his work the work of Confucianism. In Confucianism, the rectification of names means that things in actual fact should be made to accord with the implications attached to them by names. The prerequisites for correct living and even efficient government being that all classes of society should accord what they ought to be. Without the rectification of names, different words would have different actions. And this essentially means that for every action, there is a word that describes that action. The belief is that by following the rectification of names, one would be following the correct, right path. The rectification of names also calls for a standard language in which ancient rulers could impose laws that everyone could understand to avoid confusion. In the context of Chinese society at the time of Confucius, the doctrine means that every member of society are accorded names. Each name is connected to a norm or a standard of living, being, and acting that is connected to that name. In their era, for example, if you are king, you must live and act according to norms of conduct expected of a king. And if you are subject, you are supposed to behave accordingly. A brother must behave like a brother, and a wife like a wife. Standards for the behavior can be rooted into Chinese society then. Confucius himself, in his book entitled Analects, prescribed how each should behave. The consequence of not following this standard according to a name is the collapse of order, resulting in societal chaos. As you can most probably see by now, the doctrine is meant to preserve order in society and contribute to the sustained order in that society. I can just imagine this. Rules of conduct are prescribed by the empire, and everyone is obliged to follow these rules of conduct attached to a social function denoted by a name, which prescribes your existence in society. It goes like this. Every person is accorded a name within society. Each name is connected to a set of duties and responsibilities. Each name is connected to a set of duties and responsibilities. For society to be successful, every person must act worthy of that name. That is, fulfill the responsibilities and expectations connected to the name. If this is not done, there will be chaos and disorder in society. If you find yourself not conducting life according to these duties and responsibilities connected to your name, you then must rectify your name, meaning change and act in accordance with the duties and responsibilities attached to it. Reform. Sounds rigid and unrealistic, huh? I will discuss further other permutations of this set of ideas in further lectures. For now, let me follow the above syllogistic constructs and connect it to current social practice. Before we proceed further, let me reiterate the essence of the doctrine. Again, in a nutshell, the doctrine says that attached to every person is a name or a number of names. To each name is attached a certain set of duties and responsibilities. Each person, to be worthy of that name, should abide by that set of duties or responsibilities. Failing that, he or she should rectify his action and return to acts of abiding by that name. Otherwise, chaos will prevail and his or her society will fail. How can we construe this set of ideas in current society today? Well, let us confine it to just a few examples so that we may understand fully. Each of us have a name appended to each person. Let us take 4 names, for example. Parent, son, activist, then person in a relationship, shota, jowa. Let us conjure the duties and responsibilities connected to their names. Following the doctrine, there are responsibilities and duties connected to being a parent, that the person carrying that name must abide by if he or she should be worthy to be called a parent. Let's say the parent has a duty to be a good example to his son. He should be able to provide for the basic necessities for his son's growth. He should be disciplined and prioritize his family over other concerns. Otherwise, he is not fit to be called a parent. Now, a son, well, he has to follow his parents' rules and his parents' regulations while still in the family. He should respect and honor his parent. He should follow the advice of his parents. He should take care of his parents in their old age. That's the son. An activist, very interesting. To be true to his name, an activist must strive to counteract what he or she thinks is wrong in the community he or she lives in. Must uphold justice and fight injustice. Must battle societal inequities and change society for the better. Otherwise, he's not an activist. A person in a relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, jowa, must act accordingly to his or her place in that relationship. And what would that be? Well, let's say she should let the male in the relationship lead. I can already hear some of you shuddering at this thought. The wife should follow the husband. The wife should carry the name of her husband in marriage. If you do not follow these rules and responsibilities, you are not worth the name you are called and will contribute to social decay and the failure of your society. Now, this is a possible application of this doctrine. You might then say, well, in the current pluralistic society composed of so many standards and conventions on how you could conduct yourself, the doctrine may be quite difficult to apply. For example, what gives the right to prescribe what the wife should follow, or if she should follow the dictates of her husband? Most UP students will be up in arms on this. Or, what is the vigilance of the activist based on, where he or she acts contrary to the laws of the land? A legalist could retort. If you are of this observation that there's so many interpretations, you may very well have noticed a commonality in society during the olden Chinese times that may allow this doctrine to flourish. We can identify this by one word: convention. Defined as a way by which something is usually done. This usually covers all who fall under the ambit of the convention. In this case, subjects of the Chinese Empire. During that time, rules and roles in society are prescribed, regulated, and enforced by a singular power and its corresponding structure, an authoritarian regime, the Chinese Empire, constituting a Chinese empirish, if there's such a word, way of doing things. Absolute power reigns over the land. One convention rules. That's what happened then. Today we live in a pluralistic, democratic society whose components might very well contain different, often clashing standards of meanings of names. Take, for example, the name conjugal partner, or that refers to a married person. Different meanings clash there. Some equate being married to being legally bound as woman and man. Emerging concepts of marriage in other places, however, or even in the Philippines, it's starting to sprout, allows that permutation to include legal binding of two persons of the same gender, sex, or sexual orientation. Only one in countless possible examples of class of standards or concepts of duties and responsibilities. Does that mean that the doctrine of rectification of names can no longer be applied to guide our conduct today? What do you think? If you think no, then have another think. Let me explain. Note that the operative term which allowed the doctrine to flourish thousands of years ago is convention, meaning duties and responsibilities attached to the name are prescribed under one regime of conduct and regulated as such. That one regime of conduct might not be present today in a pluralistic society. However, a certain reality still prevails. Each and every person still is governed by a convention under which he or she belongs, and each convention, albeit differing and sometimes clashing, still contain names attached to persons belonging to this convention. Each name in turn corresponds to norms of conduct, duties, and responsibilities that each person is expected to abide by. Take, for example, the obligation to do tithing, allocating 10% of your earnings to the church. It may be exacted in a certain Christian denomination, say the Iglesia ni Cristo, and may be enforced as such, while a member of another, say a Roman Catholic, may contribute as he or she may like. The same concept of tithing interpreted in different senses. Likewise, certain doctrines may be accepted within one Christian denomination and shunned in another. In this case, the name Iglesia ni Cristo member attached to a certain person, to be worthy of that name, must follow the convention in that organization, which is, you must give 10%, and it's a must. While a Roman Catholic must abide by its rules. Well, you can give from the heart whatever you can, whenever you can. Thus, while that single regime or empire has disappeared, I mean the Chinese Empire, each individual, most individuals, still belong to conventions they firmly and voluntarily submitted to. If these individuals deviate from the norm, they still have to rectify their actions to be worthy of the name attached to their person. And here lies the rub. Remember the societal decay or failure that Confucius said follows non-observance of the doctrine? Well, it may very well still be a repercussion if members of the convention does not exactly rectify the names attached to them. Muddying the convention by revising the interpretation of these duties and responsibilities will tend to sow confusion to sub-societal ranks, which can be later fatal or schismic to the sub-society. In the end, remember the idea that the reason for getting into a society or societal convention is for people to veer away from chaos in what some philosophers call a state of nature, where life is nasty, brutish, and short. There is a difference, though, in the mechanism of the doctrine. If in the old rectification of names doctrine, the operating mechanism is that single regime constituting all the power with duties and responsibilities imposed by it, it is the other way around in the current application of the doctrine. Under current events, it is the individual person's decision to be bound by the convention that gives rise to the obligation to follow that certain set of duties and responsibilities, and consequently to rectify one's action if it deviates from the convention's norms. His non-observance of the norms still will have consequences. Maybe he has to be kicked out of the convention. Failing to do so will or might contaminate the societal norms within and may result in a schism within that may eventually destroy or render inutile that convention. The consequences for society and sub-society, however, is still similar to that of the olden version. This time, however, if the conventional apparatus to enforce duties and responsibilities attached to the name is not strong enough, that convention is doomed to fail or break apart. What is the significance of this to the individual person belonging to that convention? Well, if you are a member of the convention, you must be vigilant and religiously follow the duties and responsibilities connected to your being a name-carrying member of that convention. You must likewise actively contribute to the observance and enforcement of these duties and responsibilities attached to the names within that convention. That convention which you have voluntarily submitted to along with members of that convention. Otherwise, you are just an opportunist wanting to carry the name but failing to rectify your name. An imposter. So if you belong to a certain convention, say a political party, be sure you subscribe. Be sure you subscribe and follow the duties and responsibilities attached to your attached name. If you are a member of an organization, dutifully follow the norms of conduct of that organization. And if by any chance you find yourself no longer adhering to the norms and responsibilities connected to your name, well, you owe it to yourself to get out of that convention. You may denounce that name if you want, but you have to refrain from associating yourself with it. So now, examine the names connected to your person. Determine if you are still living up to the duties and responsibilities connected to that name. And if you find yourself not in compliance with the norms associated with your name, as Confucius says, rectify your name. Else, get out of that name, because you will be contributing to sophistry and illusion. Remember, two clashing conventions may very well coexist, but a convention composed of people who do not adhere to the duties and responsibilities of that convention will cause that convention to collapse and wither away, true to the predictions of the philosopher Confucius. Integrity is a must, and integrity is defined as knowing where you belong, what names you have, and acting according to the doctrine of rectification of names. Thank you very much.